Good morning. I'm Fred Kemp. I'm President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. It is an enormous pleasure to welcome you this morning's event with the First Lady of Afghanistan, Mrs. Rula Ghani. Mrs. Ghani, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Please carry our best wishes back to your husband, President Ghani, with whom you know we have a long and deep relationship at the Atlantic Council, and we gave him our Distinguished Leadership Award last year with great pride. I'd like to extend a special welcome to His Excellency Hamdullah Mohib, Mr. Ambassador, the Ambassador of Afghanistan to the United States, and his wife, Lael, who are joining us for today's conversation. Mr. Ambassador, we so greatly value the Council's strong, productive relationship with your embassy. We consider this bilateral relationship to be a relationship that has outsized importance in the months and the years ahead, and we look forward to working with you on strengthening our bonds. Atlantic Council Board Director Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad is also here. Zal's vision and commitment to Afghanistan and his generous support of the Council is a crucial catalyst that enables our Afghan programming. Any of you who have spent time with Zal know he built an incredible career as a diplomat and a foreign policy leader and has unique challenges, unique insights in the challenges we have today. But now you can go beyond just knowing it, you can actually read about it. He's just published his book, The Envoy, and if you look at my former workplace, the Wall Street Journal, in this morning's edition has an incredible review. So that's a plug that I give to all hardworking book writers. He's a compelling storyteller, so it's well worth reading. Also, to understand his upbringing in Afghanistan and the life that he led afterwards. We're also joined by Ambassador Richard Olson. Not yet. He will be joining us, who serves as the State Department Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan. Today's conversation is public and on the record, so I encourage you to join the conversation online using hashtag Rula Ghani, hashtag Rula Ghani. We're at a crucial moment for the Afghan state and people. 2015 was a significant year, the first full year in office for its unity government led by President Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah, and 2016 promises to be equally demanding. NATO is straining to maintain commitments in Europe and the Middle East, and this year the member nations will review their engagement in Afghanistan and recommit their support. Amid renewed violence between the Taliban and the government in Kabul, the Afghan government must find ways to keep at bay forces that could reverse progress made since 2001. As these security threats loom, we must consider the human cost of increased instability and violence. It is more critical than ever to cultivate a strong, healthy, and vibrant society and to deploy security and economic policies that harness the nation's potential. We in the United States have seen what happens when we take our eye off Afghanistan and the importance of that country in the past, and we cannot allow ourselves to make the same mistake again. We look forward to hearing from the First Lady on these issues at the nexus of the state and society. She has played an integral role in the government's efforts to overcome the legal, economic, and social impediments to progress. She's continually made women's, children's, and internally displaced people's issues a central focus of the debates in government. But since I'm not going to be introducing you, I'm not going to say anything more. I'm going to leave that to the Atlantic Council Senior Fellow and Khalilzad Chair, Ambassador Jim Cunningham, who until a year ago was the U.S. Ambassador to Afghanistan. I'm very proud to have him at the Atlantic Council holding this role and to have him now introduce a woman who has shown the formidable will and unmatched leadership needed to advance the conditions of women, children, and internally displaced people in Afghanistan. Ambassador Cunningham.
Thank you, Fred, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. And for the many of you who are in the audience who have been engaged for a long time in Afghanistan, I want to thank you for your support. We have a lot of distinguished guests here, so I'm glad you took very pleased that you took time out of your busy schedules to join us today to hear Mrs. Ghani. And I want to say a special word of welcome to Ambassador of Norway, Clary Aas, and Ambassador Mohib and his wife, Lael. I'm not going to go into Mrs. Ghani's bio. You have that in the documents. I also want to thank Ambassador Khalilzad for joining us today. The session is on the record. After Mrs. Ghani's remarks, Ambassador Khalilzad will join her on stage for a discussion and a Q&A. What I want to say is a brief word about Rula Ghani as a person. My wife Leslie and I were very happy to have known her and her husband when we were in Afghanistan, and we are very proud to have her as a friend. We first met several years ago at her home in Kabul. While she was active in Kabul life, she wasn't a particularly public person. She was a gracious and engaging host, a warm and thoughtful person clearly committed to improving Afghanistan and supporting her husband's untiring efforts in that regard, and I mean untiring. When Ashraf Ghani ran for president, she began to take on a public role and campaign for him, which was a first in Afghanistan. She was a gracious campaigner. She was attacked and maligned for campaigning in some quarters in sometimes hurtful ways. But she remained committed to supporting the campaign and to a better future for her country. As American ambassador, I was proud when the new president recognized her at his inauguration, a symbolic turning of the page in Afghan history. Afghanistan is facing severe problems and challenges, as we all know, but there is a new Afghanistan building and emerging. The future is in the hands of the Afghans themselves, and they are taking charge of their future. They need time and space, and millions of courageous Afghans are working every day to take advantage of that time and space. And I am convinced that there is an opportunity for this country if the international community maintains its commitment. And I'm also convinced there should be no further reductions in U.S. and international forces and support for Afghanistan until conditions on the ground and Afghan capabilities make that possible. I've been consistently reminded over the course of my career of the importance of the individual in history, the propitious occasion when the right person is at the right time and place to influence developments large or small. And Rula Ghani is one of those people. On April 6th, she takes the stage at the annual Women in the World Summit in New York City. The summit tagline is, "Meet the women who change the world." She is helping to change her adopted country's history, and Afghanistan is fortunate to have her in the right time and place. So please join me in welcoming the First Lady, Rula Ghani.
Thank you, Jim, for these very kind words. I have a little trouble remembering that I'm a First Lady. I haven't changed. I've always been what I am. And I'm comfortable with it, and I hope you will be too. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, distinguished members of the audience, Assalamu alaikum. I come to you in peace. That's what Assalamu alaikum means. By inviting me to address a select gathering of thoughtful and influential movers and shakers, men and women, the Atlantic Council and its Afghanistan Rising Initiative are honoring me. And I would like to thank Fred Camp, Jim Cunningham, and Zal Khalilzad for their warm welcome. Thank you also to you, members of the audience, for taking the time to come and listen to me. Listening is something that I myself do a lot in Afghanistan. When I first decided to fully assume the responsibilities of First Lady some 18 months ago, I was entering uncharted waters. I had no specific agenda, but that of serving the people, especially the vulnerable ones. That meant that I had to get to know them better and understand their grievances. Hence, the open door policy of my office. In the first 6 to 8 months, groups after groups have come to see me, pouring out their hearts and sharing their concerns. Some came from the provinces, others from Kabul. A few are civil servants, among them, of course, the 4 women ministers. Others are social activists or entrepreneurs. To this date, the flow is constant, if somewhat less rushed. I listen to my 4 advisors who report to me daily, 4 enthusiastic, hardworking women, slightly younger than I am, who deeply care for their country, who still remember how beautiful and strong it was 40 years ago, who are determined to help rebuild its society, and who strongly believe in the capabilities of the Afghan people. I also listen to the international community. Some of you are here today and can vouch for it, from UN agencies to embassies to international aid institutions, USAID, DFID, Australian Aid, Canadian CIDA, Japanese JICA, etc., to NGOs, and even to individuals. I'm thinking, for example, of Pascal, that French lady who is bent on creating a virtual cultural museum for Afghanistan. I love their dynamism, though I sometimes chafe at their bureaucracy. All this to say, in a roundabout way, that the information I'll be presenting to you will be firsthand, factual, and representative. It might not reflect what you read in journalistic or even in some expert accounts. I was struck by a comment I was reading on Yahoo 2 days ago on the ongoing political debate on terrorism from Susan Hessler, who is a former CIA fact-checking analyst. And she recently wrote, "People make the most incendiary, irresponsible claims as if stating indisputable facts. Hardly anyone will tell you where they got their information. Repetition and volume try to take the place of verification." I would use word for word her observation to describe the reporting on Afghanistan these days. So you know where I stand now. Journalists are so rushed trying to be the first to scoop a story, while striving to write it in its most sensational and entertaining version, that they hardly have time to check their facts. Witness the article in Washington Post 2 days ago. There were so many facts that were wrong. Like so many people were mentioned as being members of the administration that have defected. They used to be members of the former administration. So it's really not telling the story the way it is. So repeated half-truths take a life of their own, especially on social media, and suddenly become conventional wisdom. The result today is the existence of several myths that need to be debunked. Myth number 1. The Taliban are winning. Really? Then why is it that we keep hearing about the same 600 meters in Helmand being lost and regained every other week or every other month? And why is it that their leader cannot claim to be Amir al-Mu'mineen? The fact is that they do not fully control enough territory to be able to make that claim. And by the way, I do want to ask this question. Who is the Institute for the Study of War that produces maps to the contrary? I really would like to know, because their information is totally skewed. America has lost the war. That's myth number 2. What war? America came in to hunt down Osama bin Laden, which was done. To my knowledge, America is not at war with the Afghan people. Am I right? America has failed in Afghanistan, myth number 3. Wasn't America's aim to help rebuild the country and help it on its way to achieving political stability? Wasn't the peaceful succession from President Karzai to President Ghani the sign of political maturity? Myth number 4. The electoral process in 2014 was fraudulent. How can you still insist on that when the UN Commission carried on 3 different recounts, and I'm talking about total recounts, over 2 months, and was unable to discover the alleged fraud on an industrial scale? They did find some irregularities, and they found them in both camps, and the numbers were reduced by 1%. So again, the article in the Washington Post talk about legitimizing the government. This is a legitimate government. And if you don't believe in elections, maybe the US should stop talking about democracy, because democracy is believing in the voice of the people and what they say. Anyway. I don't know which number this myth is. Other myth. There are quite a few. The unity government is not working. I ask, when Angela Merkel took over 6 months to put together her unity government, nobody in the world blinked. Why should it be different in the case of Afghanistan? It takes time to create a unity government. Afghanistan is falling apart economically. Well, maybe they mean that the pockets of the previous bureaucratic and political elite are no longer bulging with ill-gotten money. In my book, less corruption should be considered progress. The present Afghan government is inefficient and disorganized. Well, it takes time to clean up years of neglect and absence of management. It takes even more time to set up solid foundations on which to build the reforms. Let us keep an open mind for a year or so. Besides, in their USIP peace brief, Bill Bird and Khalid Painda are already reporting that collection of revenue has already increased by 22% in 2015. If anything, this is not a sign of disorganization. Afghan men are an uncivilized lot. Illiteracy does not mean lack of culture. This is something people in the West have hard time to understand. There is what you call oral culture, and it can be deeply ingrained in people. Afghan traditional society is highly cultured. Of course, this is seldom the case for warlords and mercenaries, but isn't that true in most post-conflict situations? And again, it takes time to replace the reign of violence with the rule of law. And the government is hard at work reforming the justice system. Afghan women are worse off than before, and any peace with the Taliban will be made at their expense. Or its alternative, women have no say in the peace negotiations. I've heard that so many times. Let's get the record straight. The number 2 on the High Peace Council is no other than Mrs. Sorabi, former governor of the Bamiyan province, and no shrinking violet. Another woman is also on the negotiating team, Mrs. Hasina Safi, head of the all-important Afghan Women Network, AWN. Women are taking part in the peace process and at the highest level. Besides, President Ghani himself has repeatedly declared in public speeches that the issue of women's rights is non-negotiable. I will not be surprised if some of you will want to raise questions regarding several of the preceding points, and I will be glad to engage them during the question and answer session. Let me, though, tell you more about a topic close to my heart, the women of Afghanistan. As I mentioned at the beginning, there is a constant stream of women who come to see me. Lately, I have noticed an increasing number of upbeat accounts. Of course, we are far from having solved all the problems and challenges. It has been only a year since the barbaric tragedy of Farkhunda in Kabul, and even less since the savage stoning of Rokhshana in Ghor, to name just a few cases of violence against women. But the women of Afghanistan did not take this lying down and have raised their voices against all this violence. One of the results of their efforts has been the creation, with the help of the Ministry of Women's Affairs, of an emergency fund dedicated to the victims of violence that will help cover their expenses, especially their legal and medical ones. Another has been the holding of several meetings and conferences with religious scholars as counterparts to discuss what is the place of women in Islam and to clarify any misconception. And believe me, you would be surprised as to how many injunctions in the Holy Quran preach respect for women and equal treatment of women and men. One very important development in our country since the new government came to power 18 months ago has been the greater participation of women in public affairs. We now have 4 women ministers, all 4 very active and effective. Our foreign service now counts 3 women ambassadors, soon to be 4. We almost had our first woman judge at the Supreme Court. By the way, do you know that we have over 250 women judges in Afghanistan, whereas some of our neighbors do not have even one? Many more women have been joining the civil service, some of them in responsible positions such as deputy ministers. The police are aiming at recruiting 5,000 women and have already passed the halfway mark. The army has identified positions that are exclusively to be filled by women, while also declaring some other positions to be open to both women and men, and so on and so on. In other words, the present government is actively pursuing the integration of women in its decision-making processes. At the cabinet level, a Commission for Gender Policy, led by Vice President Sarwar Danesh and attended by representatives of several ministries, has been busy looking into the gender units of all ministries. Every ministry has a gender unit, which you'd call here Equal Opportunity Commission. And the gender sensitivity of all official rules and policy. The ongoing reform of the justice system is also benefiting women. A special division, which is called D1 in Dari, of the Supreme Court is now dedicated to cases of violence against women and children, and it's headed by one of the Supreme Court judges. This has ensured special attention and higher speed in resolving those cases. One such case is that of Farkhunda that is being carefully re-examined. Also, a special commission of the Supreme Court has been reviewing the cases of every imprisoned woman, and to date, 95 women have been released or pardoned, and 42 have seen their sentences reduced. New regulations regarding harassment at the workplace were issued in September 2015. The criminal code is being amended so that women running away from home are no longer automatically considered criminals and sent to jail. Here again, many more adjustments are still needed, but the justice system is definitely becoming increasingly fair towards women. And I could go on and on about the women-friendly policies that are being implemented by the Ministry of Women's Affairs, of Agriculture, of Rural Development, and of Labor and Social Affairs, following the guidelines of the official National Women Economic Empowerment Plan. My own team of advisors have also had their share in bringing improvement to the condition of women in Afghanistan. In the health field, one major accomplishment has been the formation of an Afghan Cancer Association, bringing together all existing health cancer specialists under the auspices of the Public Health Ministry to set up a unified policy towards the fight against cancer with an emphasis on breast and cervical cancer. Similarly, our office has supported a campaign launched by the Counter-Narcotics Ministry and has helped in establishing a treatment center for addicts. For those of you who have been to Afghanistan, at the time it was called the Phoenix Camp. We now call it the Santere Omid, which is the Center of Hope, Center for Hope, with one special hospital dedicated to the treatment of 300 women addicts. So it will not surprise you if I conclude today with a message of hope. The hope that I see on the faces of the women who come to visit with me, the hope that these women are slowly regaining control of their destiny, the hope that the protection afforded to them by the Afghan constitution is gaining momentum, the hope that they can become active participants in their country's social, economic, and political life, the hope that they can dream again for a better future for them and their families. Nowhere is this message of hope stronger than in the lives of the rising generations. We have terrific young women coming up. I see it in Malika, who at age 25, with a starting loan of merely 1,700 AFs, I think it's the equivalent of $40 or around that. She found a way to start 3 small businesses, open 2 high schools, and buy a piece of land on which she hopes to build a pasta factory. That's ambition. I see it in her contemporary Shabana, who are acutely aware of the educational aspiration of girls from the provinces, because girls in Kabul and other urban centers have access to education. But in the provinces, it's still very difficult. She is finding so many ways to provide them with opportunities for learning in Kabul and abroad. She gets some scholarship. Here in the States, there is the King's Academy in Jordan. She sent some, I think, in, I think it's Singapore, I'm not quite sure. And who is about to fulfill a dream of opening a boarding secondary and high school for them in the capital, Kabul. I see it in another of their contemporary, Narges, who has founded her own NGO in order to be of help to her community, attending to those in need, and who single-handedly managed to accompany 20 handicapped children to India, where she had arranged for their treatment, and came back with 17 of them now able to walk. It was wonderful to see those little guys coming back at the airport. I see it in Leila, who after several years of taking care of her brother, who was addicted to drugs, decided to open a shelter where 40 addicts are attended, and who is running in parallel a small restaurant in order to cover her expenses. I see it in Amina, an MBA graduate from AUAF, the American University in Afghanistan, who after several years of helping Kabul University students in the Department of Economics start their own business, is now about to start a venture herself that covers the whole process of production of wool, threads, and carpets in order to create 5,000 jobs to women in Afghan provinces. If this is not hope, what is? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that clear and forceful statement. I want to thank my friend Fred and my friend Jim for their welcome of you, and add my own words of welcome. For the audience, so they are in the picture, I have known President Ghani for a very long time, since we were in high school together. In fact, when we were going to come to the United States as high school students, we went to the American embassy together to get our visa. And in filling the application for that visa, your first name, last name, and I did not know what the last name meant, because as you know, most Afghans have just a first name. So the president, Dr. Ghani, was next to me, so he was a little more worldly than I was at that time, because I had just come from Mazar-e-Sharif to Kabul, and he was a resident of Kabul for a long time, and so I asked for his advice. What does this last name mean? So he explained to me that your father's name is Khalil, which it was. My father is dead now, and so immediately we made my last name there on the spot. So I owe Khalil Zad, which has served me well. So I thank him for that, and we have been interacting for a very long time. And in Beirut, where both Dr. Ghani and I were students, the president met his future wife. With that background, I wanted to start the conversation. We have about 50 minutes or so, and give ample time to the audience, but ask a couple of questions, if I might. One is that you have been quoted by the IG, the Inspector General, expressing your view with regard to the development activities or investments that have been made, or the monies that have been spent on development projects. Concerned that the past pattern with regard to a legacy project that the United States has with regard to women, that past pattern of holding conferences, giving certificates, contracting and subcontracting would not be repeated. I would be interested, and I'm sure the audience would be interested, to know your view of the lessons learned, and how should, going forward, expenditures focus on development generally, or women project in particular should be carried out.
Yes, I remember seeing the quote. Is this working? Yes, it is working. I remember seeing the quote in a cigar report. And I was talking at the launch of the Promote program, which you know is a 5-year program that USAID has started for helping Afghan women. And the program had not yet started, but I kind of raised the concern that this program should not repeat the mistakes of the past. Because indeed, there has been a lot of projects, a lot of programs, a lot of NGOs, a lot of international aid agencies that have come and spent money in Afghanistan. But those people who have participated in those projects, more often than not, have had probably took part in workshops for 2 weeks, and then ended up the workshop with a nicely signed documents that they can frame and put on the wall in their home, and nothing else. No follow-up, no trying to use their new skills, if ever they acquired any new skills, because sometimes it was also the case that they didn't really learn much. And so I wanted to tell, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, to promote people that please make sure that you are doing something that's substantial, that you are training people, you're doing capacity training, you're training people so that they can carry on after your training and do something substantial.
Well, thank you. You in your statement, you mentioned the progress that Afghanistan has made, and in one area that a lot of progress has been made, impacting also women, is the spread of telecommunication, which covers now almost all of Afghanistan, from a very few phones. I remember when I went there first after 9/11, taking satellite phone to distribute, to maybe now 17, 18 million cell phones, and to what extent that success can be used, which also includes lots of women having the means to communicate now, to address some of the areas that where more progress is needed, whether it's in the area of quality of education, whether it's in the area of economic empowerment of women, to include them more in the economy.
Phones are a tool. And it's true, like Ambassador Khalizad is saying, that we now have phones all over Afghanistan. And we have phones, a lot of people also have smartphones, which means they can access things on the internet. Phones have been used. Phones have been used. I know of an organization that uses them for literacy programs. And they have done literacy in the more classical way of having a classroom and teaching people how to read and write. But when they started doing it on the phones, it was much faster. The women would learn in a month or less than a month. And the reason is that they had a motivation. They wanted to be able to use their phone to send messages. So they knew that that skill they were going to learn, they're going to be able to apply immediately. And this is maybe the secret of the success. It's you have to teach people things they need to learn so that they can improve. Phones, I know of a group of poets and writers. Mostly when I talk about groups, they are usually women. And these were women. And they communicate, they come and meet in Kabul once or twice a year. They don't have much money. They don't get money from anyone. But they communicate with each other by phone. And sometimes if some member was not able to come to the meeting, they will put the phone on speakerphone. And she will be in her village, wherever she is, and she will be reading, for example, a poem that she's written. And she would be reading it aloud, and they will discuss it to her and tell her what they thought she did well, what they thought she didn't do well. So it really helps them come together. So yes, phones are really very important. And phones are now ubiquitous. Everybody has a phone. Even the cook or the driver, you need a phone to be able to function in Kabul.
Yeah, and I think the phone, as Afghanistan leapfrogged, not having line phones to cell phones, an area that I have been thinking about is whether this digital technology generally can be an instrument for addressing some of the other issues, particularly with regard to the quality of education or with regard to financial inclusion, where we see significant results in parts of Africa like Kenya on digital finance. Can Afghanistan benefit from the infrastructure that is developing with regard to cell phone technology to address some of the other issues of development?
I think I can think now of other examples. I'm not involved in this, so it's as the details come back to my mind. Phones are now being tested to pay people, to pay them directly instead of going through intermediaries, which would cut down on a lot of corruption. Phones are used by traders to find out, if somebody's trading in wool and is in one province. With the phone, either by calling people or by looking up the internet, they can see what is the price of wool in another part of the country or in other countries. And so they can, economically, it is a tool to find out, to get more information. It's really, it can become very important. I'm not myself, as I said, involved in pushing any kind of phone program, so I can't really talk more about it.
Well, I've been very impressed. I do watch, as we talked before coming here, Afghan news whenever I can. And I've been very impressed with your public statements in Farsi and your commitment and your leadership has been extremely inspiring. So I thank you for your service as the First Lady for Afghanistan. With that, I would like to open the floor and take questions, comments. Please introduce yourself so we know who you are. Please, here, and then we'll move around.
Until he gets his microphone, I want to say that, yes, I've mastered the Dari language. I've also given a speech in Pashto.
Oh, you have? I have not heard
On
that.
April 6th, I went to Jalalabad and joined their Women's Day, International Women's Day celebration. And I spoke in Pashto because this is the language they
Well,
speak.
thank you. I missed that. Excellent. Thank you.
There are things you don't know about me. Okay, please.
Will not make any comments.
Well, Madam First Lady, congratulations on speaking Farsi and Pashto better than I do, and I was born in Kabul. My name is Rafi Kitab. I'm the program director for a group called Capitalize International in Washington, D.C. I thank you for being a positive, inspirational public image, not only for the women of Afghanistan, but for the country as a whole. My question has to do with education, and we all accept education to be the master key for success for all individuals in society. Many years ago, I was a student at Georgetown University, and I was attending many meetings at the U.S. Afghan Women's Council. Back then, we were debating how to create some social changes that are sustainable for economic empowerment of women in Afghanistan. And I always, on numerous occasions, suggested the idea of creating a women's only university for Afghan women in Afghanistan, modeled after Simmons and Mount Holyoke colleges in Massachusetts, United States. Back then, nobody listened to me, but I recently have heard that that idea has been adopted. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that, and if you are engaged in that intervention, because I believe such an intervention is the right intervention for future of the women's empowerment across the broader spectrum of life for Afghan women in social, economic, and political aspects of life. Thank you.
Yes, there is a project for a women's university. I will not take credit for the idea. It was one of my husband's promises during the campaign. And he followed on that promise like he followed on many other promises. It's, I think, the country that has taken upon itself to create this university is Turkey. And they are, as far as I know, like a month ago, I was with the Minister of Higher Education, and she told me that they were about to sign the Memorandum of Understanding. So it is underway, and probably within a year, we'll have that university. It's going to be located on Tape Nader Shah. It will have a beautiful view of Kabul. And I hope that it will benefit a lot of women.
Thank you. Please, back there. Yes. If you could introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Johan Senrath, and I'm a graduate student at Georgetown University. Thank you, First Lady, Madam First Lady, for your presentation. I'm originally from Sri Lanka, and being a Sri Lankan, I'm following the Cricket World Cup quite recently. And you know, the established cricketing nations have been incredibly impressed by the feats of the Afghanistan team. In fact, the semi-finalists, the West Indies, were defeated by Afghanistan a few days ago. So my question to you, ma'am, is, do you see the potential for cricket to advance a nation building process, or at least like garnering consensus on a common national identity? We've seen in the past sports being used as a tool to bring people together. What's the role of cricket, in your view, in bringing Afghans together? Thank you.
You might laugh, but it is a very pertinent statement. Cricket is extremely important in Afghanistan because it is news that nobody can turn into negative news. It is positive news. And they're very proud of their teams. And on cricket night, everybody stays up to watch on TV the cricket matches. And they were very happy to see that Afghanistan had progressed to the upper level, and that they had 4 of the 4 matches that they did win 1 against a country that had been the champion in 2012. So people were very, very proud. Yes, sports can play a very important role. And as you said, it's a leveler. In sports, it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter anything. It matters that you are good at it. And it's a good symbol of national unity, yes.
Way back. Yes, please. The gentleman who's standing, yes. And then we'll come this way.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm Jay Kansara with the Hindu American Foundation, a nonprofit NGO that studies the plight of the Hindu minority in several countries. Unfortunately, in Afghanistan, the Hindu and Sikh communities continue to decline in number. They seek refugee status in European countries. Do you, in all honesty, do you feel that the Hindus and Sikhs of Afghanistan and other religious minorities actually do have a place in the state, and can the government guarantee their security, or should they seek refuge elsewhere in order to just survive?
I'm going to start by answering with a larger answer, a more broader answer. It seems nowadays in the world that everybody wants to compartmentalize every country into different groups. Okay, in Afghanistan, it might be that we have the ethnic groups, and the Hindus are one of them. In other countries, you saw what happened in the Middle East, and suddenly we discovered we had all these groups that lived there for centuries and lived there in peace, and somehow they started being persecuted. I think this trend is a very negative trend. The Hindus have been part of our history. There are Hindus in Afghanistan, there are Afghans in India. There has been a back and forth between the 2 countries. It's a very strong one. I visited India, and so many people had reminiscences of Kabul during the good days, how they would go on their honeymoon to Kabul, how they would go for taking the SAT and the TOEFL to Kabul because it was not on offer in India. Where now we're in a reverse situation where Kabul and Afghanistan needs to catch up to where India is. The Sikh and Hindu community in Afghanistan, they are Afghans. They speak the language. They have been there for centuries. There are certain practical consideration I know of that relate to, for example, the funerals, where you need to have a pyre and burn the bodies. And I think the government has reached an agreement with the Hindu community about creating more modern facilities, because people were complaining. You know, Kabul has suddenly expanded. It's become such a large city, and there were no places to be able to do these rituals. So there was some friction there. I would encourage the Sikhs to stay, the Sikh and Hindus to stay. Afghanistan is an inclusive country, and we are a country where, for example, Shias and Sunnis have no problems, unlike our neighbors. It is a country that is really very hospitable. Okay.
Thank you. This lady over there, yes, please.
Marzia Faraz, National Democratic Institute. Thank you so much for the wonderful speech, as always inspiring. My question is on sustainability. As you mentioned, National Unity Government has made some great progress towards strengthening women's role across different sectors, encouraging women's political engagement, assigning women members to High Peace Council at very high official government positions. Do you think these efforts are sustainable? Talking beyond parity numbers, filling in seats and positions, how sustainable do you think these efforts are? Thank you.
The efforts will be as sustainable as the women themselves. You know, you can open up opportunities, you can encourage, but the work has to be done by the people themselves. So if they are really keen on being part of the society, on playing a role, there they have their chance and they'll build their situation. If they're not keen, if it's just, you know, a passing fancy, but the way I see the women in Afghanistan, they're very keen and they're very grateful to be able to have so many fora where they can express themselves, where they can have an opinion and can push for certain things that they need. So I'm optimistic.
Great. This lady over here, and then we'll go back. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You had a wonderful speech, and Mr. Khalilzad also. May I ask my question in Dari, please?
Sure. بفرمایید.
Thank you. شما میفهمین که در شب روز سیلاسا افغانا از افغانستان میرن به طرف کشورهای اروپایی و به می ترتیب کشورهای اروپایی هم به سطوح آمدن، اینا را دوباره رد مرز میکنن و به افغانستان میفرستن. خانم‌ها معمولا بسیار از لحاظ عاطفی قوی تر از مردها هستند. من ایسه یک زن بسیار مهربان چی فکر میکنین در این رابطه و سهولتایی که برای کسایی که برمیگردن از کشورهای اروپایی چی است؟ مخصوصا زیادترین قربانی ها را زنها و اطفال دادن در طول مدت. و سوال دیگه می است که دکتر صاحب اشاره کردن به تلفن موبایل. افغان وایرلس همچنان سهولت‌هایی را به وجود آورده که از طریق این موبایل خانم ها حل مشکل در موارد مختلف میکنن. مشوره های سی میگیرن، پولشان ترانسفر میشه یا انتقال میشه. چی فکر میکنین؟ آیا فکر میکنین که این سیستم رایج یا نهادی نشود در افغانستان؟ تشکر.
May I translate for the audience the two questions? Question one was the issue of Afghans who have gone to Europe coming back. What is the government plan for reintegrating them in Afghanistan? And two was follow-up to what I raised on the mobile money, that there are benefits that already women have achieved from that. What more can they achieve from that technology? Please.
Okay. Yes, we have. I read the latest number, but I don't know because I have no real statistics. The latest number was 180,000 Afghans had left the country. I want you to put that in perspective. The press makes it sound like there are hordes and hordes of Afghans that are leaving. In a country of 32 million inhabitants, 180,000 is a small number. Now, to the question whether these Afghans will be welcomed when they come back to Afghanistan, of course. Afghanistan is their country. They are more than welcome to come and to, now that they have seen that the situation elsewhere is not much better, maybe they will feel more motivated to contribute, to work for building up their country. So I don't see any problem with their coming back. As far as I don't know, the second question is not really a question, it's a statement. And I welcome this thing. It's kind of publicity for AWC, but that's okay. You know, well, yes, why not? Anything that can help women, I'm really for it.
Good. Yes, this young lady here.
سلام، فاطمه جعفری هستم، منشی شورای ولایتی هرات. اول می‌خواستم تشکر بکنم به عنوان خانم جوان که
زنده باشید.
حداقل به خاطر شجاعت و مسئولیت پذیری که شما داشتین پوزیشن بانوی اول را بعد از سالها در افغانستان احیا کردین و از او آدرس امروز در اینجا حضور دارین و گزارش میدین نسبت به کارکردها و مسئولیت‌هایی که در قبال جامعه افغانی و مخصوصا زنان افغان داشتین. میخوایم تشکر بکنیم از شما به خاطر زحماتی که در طول حداقل 1.5 سال گذشته کشیدین که آلی دیگه وزیر شدن، معین شدن در اداره افغانستان فقط مخصوص یک عده به خصوصی از زنان و مردان نیست. هر زن تحصیل کرده ای از هر قریه افغانستان بدون در نظر داشتن ای که از کدام قبیله هست و چه وابستگی قومی داره و چه وابستگی نژادی و مذهبی داره میتونه که به خود این اجازه رو بده که فکر بکنه برای که یک جایگاه داشته باشه در حکومت افغانستان. از این بابت تشکر میکنم. اما همه این گپ ها با در نظر گرفتن یک چیزی به نام تبعیض مثبت هست. شخص شما چه برنامه‌ای داره برای که برای آینده خانم ها بدون در نظر گرفتن یک موضوعی به نام تبعیض مثبت بتونن که رقابت بکنن با مردانی که امروز تحصیل کردن در خیلی از کشورهای دنیا و برگشتن در افغانستان و خانم ها در واقع او زمینه برایشان کمتر مهیا بوده؟ چه برنامه‌ای وجود داره که در دوره آینده زنها بدون که تبعیض مثبتی در حق اونها وجود داشته باشه بتونن که فکر بکنن به یک وزارت، فکر بکنن به یک معینیت؟
Let me just very quickly, because it's very long.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, the lady was very kind to thank me for the work I've done and how I've given hope to every woman in Afghanistan that she can take part in the decision process in Afghanistan. Her question is there a plan for affirmative action to allow women to have more places? I'm not quite sure, because this is not something I am doing. Now you've raised the question, I will look into it. This is how I function. People come to me and raise question and say there is this. So I say, okay, I go back, I try to understand who's doing what and all this, and maybe eventually I'll be able to push. But you have to remember, I was neither elected nor selected. I have on the book, I have very little power. It's just because the women and the men are really appreciating what I'm doing, that people, if ever somebody from my office calls and say, I'm calling from the office of the First Lady, they are responding. I hope I'll be able to look into this. Thank you.
I think one thing that she did make to congratulate the First Lady was for institutionalizing this office or the position of the First Lady in Afghanistan. Please, yes, back there.
Thank you. My name is Mohammad. I'm
Yes.
privileged to go to school at Boston University on a Fulbright scholarship. More privileged
Great.
to meet the first lady that I have that we have in Afghanistan, that I have got to meet in my lifetime. You spoke about long-term thinking, long-term planning with the initiatives. How long do you need to put Afghanistan in a position that is reasonably irreversible in terms of development and stability? And how are you explaining that to our allies for your administration and those that are going to follow you? Thank you.
Again, I will mention that I don't do politics, but I will. So my answer is not going to be very precise, because I don't interfere. When I talk with foreigners, it's much more on social and development issues. It takes time to build. It takes a minute or two to destroy. One bomb can destroy everything in no time. But then to rebuild that house, it takes 1 year, 1.5 years. The previous administration was very good at stopping the civil war. Remember, we had a civil war for 23 years. We were killing each other, we were bombing each other, we were destroying each other. So you have to give credit to the previous administration that President Karzai was able to bring everybody at the table and say, we are all together in this. Unfortunately, from the point of view of management, the previous administration was not very detail-oriented, let's put it. So they, as long as things were going on, they carried. So this administration has arrived and found a lot of disorganization. And they are hard at work to try and bring some kind of order to the administration. Again, I will mention the Washington Post. I just read it yesterday, so this is why it's still in my mind, talking about a very disorganized government. The ministers now have to have 100-day programs. And at the end of the 100-day, they are in the cabinet. Whoever said that the cabinet sessions don't do anything must not have attended cabinet session. In the cabinet, everyone reports on what he has done during those 100 days. Has he met the goals he had set he was going to meet? Has he or she was he or she able to move a little further, organize, or whatever? So I think there has been now 4 different 100-day programs. And so through this, the ministries are getting to be a little more organized. It will take time. Every ministry has employees in the thousands. And you need to retrain everyone and to tell them, this is the way you do things, this is not the way. So it's going to take time. I cannot say whether it will take a year, 2 years, 3 years. I hope that by the end of the 5-year mandate, you will see a very big difference from the beginning. That's what I will commit to.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Here and
There's,
then over there.
Please.
Please. Yeah. Sure. Over here. Yep.
Okay, it's okay. Let's take this person
Okay,
now, if
please,
there's-
while you're getting organized. Yes.
All right. Hello. Yes, thank you very much for being here today. I was in Kabul a couple of weeks ago, and I had the pleasure of hearing you speak at the International Women's Day Conference in the Mani School. My question has to do with how do you relate to the women's ministry? How do you divide your lanes in the road, as it were? What do you do as opposed to what the women's ministry does?
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
That's
my
all
name
right.
is Max Gross.
Yes. Max, of course, has had a long relationship with Afghanistan.
That's true.
With married to an Afghan lady. Yes, please.
Who I think knows you, and I also know your husband.
Thank you.
It's a very good question because it's going to clarify something. I'm not about creating new institutions. I'm about helping the existing institution work better. And so I do that with all the ministries I am in contact with. The Ministry of Women's Affairs, I see the minister rather regularly whenever she needs me. I don't necessarily summon the ministries and ministers and say, come, I need to understand what you're doing. No, they come to me. It always surprises me, but apparently I do have some say in Afghanistan. And they come, they ask for advice. I never say, you have to do this. I'm never prescriptive. I never say, this is the way to do, don't do this, don't. No, 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 no. She had, she came to a ministry that was a little bit in turmoil. There were 2 very strong women as deputy ministers, and she had a little bit difficulty with them. I never said, do this or do that. Eventually, the 2 have been replaced, and she has 2 other deputy ministers. I've worked with her, for example, when I was interested in the gender units in the ministries. And we worked very hard. We brought all the people from gender ministry, there are 2 or 3 per ministry. We had a huge meeting, and we discussed things, and we kind of made a summary at the end of things that were not working well. And after that, we followed through. I helped her follow through. For example, I got the guy of Tashkilat organizational structure to sit with her to write TORs for these gender units, which is, yeah, for you and me, it is obvious that that's what you need. But it's not obvious in Afghanistan. So we did the TORs. And eventually, I think after that, I let go because I saw she was really taking the reins and she was going to do it. It's her project. It's her ministry. I'm glad that she came to me for some advice and I was able to help her in a small way, but that was essential. So yes, I do the same with the Ministry of Counter-Narcotics. I also have some dealings with the Ministry of Higher Education, but not really much. Ministry of Education wanted me to be an ambassador for literacy, but they are undergoing a very big reform, and that has been shelved. So it probably come, you probably hear that I'm doing literacy. But I mean, all I'm doing is advocacy, is maybe talking when I'm seeing people, telling people the way I see it, and hoping that somebody will pick up the project and run with it.
Great. Please, yes. Can you give her the mic? Please stand up so they can see you to give you the mic. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
Najla Abdus-Samad, Executive Director of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council at Georgetown University.
Okay.
We are so grateful that you are here. And I'd also like to publicly thank you for staying up in the middle of the night. Very quietly, I don't think people know this, and you've been sending us support and advice, and you participate in our meetings at times when you don't even have the staff to do it. And we're just so grateful to you for reaching out to us here in Washington, D.C. I'd like to ask specifically if you could talk further about one of the myths that you brought up, the myth of the Afghan male, the Afghan man as being uncivilized. And part of why I ask about that is because in my work, what I found is with all of these successful, beautiful, talented Afghan women that you talk about, there is always, usually, a strong and supportive and feminist and wonderful father, husband, brother, cousin, uncle. That I think we don't always hear about. So if you could talk a bit about the beauty of the Afghan man in this struggle.
You can take a lot of time on that.
No, it's okay.
Take all the time you need.
I think in that respect, Afghanistan is not very different from other countries in the world.
I was a downer.
I will give you the example. We have a hotline that's called 6464. That is a hotline for the resolution of family problems. It's a hotline where people can call anonymously and ask for advice. It's, of course, addressed to women, basically, because it's the women who have problems. But I found out that 70% of the calls are initiated by men. Fathers, brothers, sons, uncles, who are worried about a situation in which a woman dear to them finds herself in. And so they will call and make sure that it is legitimate and all that. And once they are reassured that it's a good place for that person, they give the phone to that person and she calls. So this is, I think, the best confirmation that there are men that care about their women. And I think I'm not saying anything that's untrue when I say that there is no Afghan father that does not love his daughter. They love their daughter so much. They really cuddle her and are very close to their daughters. But eventually, with the cultural norms and all this, they take some distance. And from afar, you think maybe they don't care for their daughter, but they do care about their daughters. I hope I've answered.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Yes, all the way in the back, please.
I've got a lot of voice out here.
Thank you.
Ken Meyercord, World Docs. What is the enrollment rate in primary and secondary education, and does Afghanistan have enough resources to educate both their boys and their girls?
It's a good question. I don't know the numbers, and statistics in Afghanistan are not really very precise. But I do know that there were articles at the beginning of last year's academic year, which is about now, that 1.3 million young people joined the first grade last year. Now, I don't have any confirmation. I read that in the newspaper. Our education system was extremely strong and has produced people like Ambassador Khalilzad, my husband, and other people. It was because we had a very I can't see the word, very forth-looking queen in 1919 to 1929. Queen Suraya was in charge of education. She was the Minister of Education. And she made sure that a lot of people got scholarship to go and study abroad. But she insisted there, she was prescriptive, she insisted that everybody should study education. I had a friend tell me that her father wanted to become a doctor. But no, the scholarship was only for education. So he came back and became a teacher in a school or in university. So we had some very highly educated people who were running our schools and our universities. We had a very strong educational system. And I'm sure Ambassador Khalilzad will confirm that all the Afghans that came to the American University of Beirut performed very well by comparison to the other students at that institution, because they had a very solid grounding. So I think we can do it. I don't think we have reached that point yet. I think at this point we have a ministry that needs to be reformed totally. And we have to, let alone, we need to know how many schools we have. I mean, you've read the CIGAR reports that said that some schools are only there on paper. We don't know how many schools we have. We don't know how many children attend. We have too many schools in Kabul that have 3 shifts, which means the first shift starts at 6 o'clock in the morning and finishes at 11. Then what does the child do afterwards? And then and the last shift finishes at 9 o'clock in the evening. There is a lot to be done in the education sector, but I am confident that we can do it because it was done in Afghanistan. We do have the experience.
You mentioned Queen Suraya. Have you studied her, and are you, you take some inspiration from her role?
What happened is that when I became a public person, you know, when I became a first lady that the public could reach out to, a lot of people compared me to her. Mm-hmm. So yes, I tried to understand what her role was and what she was doing. She was much more involved than I am. She was a minister in the cabinet. She was, she went everywhere with the king and all this. I don't do that. I'm not interested. I mean, she was young, and maybe it was, she felt it was her role and her responsibility. I feel my responsibility is to be there and to listen. I feel my responsibility is to be like a little bit like an ombudswoman. Mm-hmm. You know, a person where people can come, complain, and I never scold them. I scolded one group of students from Rohr. They had come and they wanted me. They said we don't have a road to Herat. We need a paved road to Herat so that we're not so. Rohr is one of these provinces that are in the center of Afghanistan. It's quite isolated. I said, okay, that's a good demand. The other one, they said, we have 3 rivers. We need electricity produced out of these rivers. I said, fine, perfect. I will convey your messages. And then they said, we don't have schools. I mean, we don't have rooms for schools. In winter, we have the schools next to the wall that gets the sun, and in summer, we go to the wall that gets the shade for the schools. We need buildings. And I looked at them. They were a group of 25 or 30 strapping young men. And I said, come on. You get together for 1 day or 2 days, and you can build the 1 or 2 room schools. You're not going to wait for the government to come and build you your school. Don't be lazy. So we laughed. So I do scold people, but very, very seldom. So I think my role is much more to be a place where people feel safe to come, safe to be able to say whatever is on their heart. Sometimes I have answers, like I have answers sometimes for your questions. But at least they feel they have been heard. That's my role. It's not more than that.
Now, you've been First Lady now for 18 months. And you've talked to a lot of Afghans. If you had to identify one thing that the government, I don't want you to get you in trouble with, that the government needs to pay attention to in terms of empowerment of women, what would that be? And I'll ask a second question, because this will be the concluding. What is your message to the United States now? You've had a very, thanks to you, a good, very positive conversation, uniquely positive today.
Thank you.
And what would your message be to the United States, if we could conclude on that?
As I said in my speech, there is still a lot to do for women, but we are we're going in the right direction. That's what I feel. I think it's probably very difficult for people outside the government to understand how much work is ongoing within the government. It's I don't get to see my husband very often. He leaves usually early in the morning and comes back sometimes at 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11. But, and he has all the people around him. I mean, it's really very interesting because the PPS, the guards within the presidential palace, have had to change their shifts because he starts very early and he's still up very late. And so instead of having 2 shifts, now they have 3 shifts so that they can cover him. But anyway, I think the government is trying very hard. And whenever I see a detail or a place where, like, for example, the affirmative action thing, I raise it and I'll see whether they do something or not. So yes, there will always be room for improvement, especially it has been only now, it's only been 1 year because it took 6 months to get the unity government. It's only been 1 year of functioning. And I think for 1 year, we've done quite a lot. And as far as the message to the American public, I'm very tempted to say, don't believe what they say in the newspapers.
There's a lot of skepticism towards the media in the American body politic.
In this audience, at least I can feel it.
Yeah.
But the administration itself knows what my husband is doing, so I don't need to tell the administration anything. But the American public, just remember that Afghans are people like any other people. They have dreams. And maybe their dream is to be able to live in a country where there is peace. I just have been in Morocco a few days ago. And I'd been in Morocco when I was in my mid-20s. And Morocco and Lebanon, at the time I didn't know Afghanistan, Morocco and Lebanon were really at the same level. And I was pleasantly surprised, but also very sad when I went to Morocco this time, I was there only for 3 days, but I could tell how much Morocco had developed, how much life was pleasant in Morocco, how people seemed at ease and pursuing their own goals, their own dreams. Their ministers were outspoken and very well read and well trained. Everybody was very happy, very hospitable. And I thought, my God, this is exactly what Lebanon would have been had we not had the war. So I really, maybe this is what I'm feeling these days. I really understand the cost of war. War destroys, and then it's very difficult and it takes very time-consuming to build again. But the people of Afghanistan want that peace. They want to be able to live in their villages, to be able to live in their cities. They want to be able to have good schools in their... they have the same aspiration as people everywhere in the world. And I do hope that we'll be able to give it to them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. The time is up. That was an excellent conversation, a very positive, engaging conversation. Please join me in thanking the First Lady of Afghanistan.
Okay. My battle with my chadar is over.